Well, hello and welcome. We're back again. I'm Steve Coburn with Frank Dew. Frank is a certified focal point coach, and those of you who are familiar with the teachings of Brian Tracy know that Frank now has a really good knowledge base about business and coaching because Brian Tracy's top of the line. And Frank is a specialist and working with entrepreneurs who are also caregivers for parents and family elders, caregivers for spouses, uh, caregivers for siblings, caregivers for children. And when you think about it, many of us that are entrepreneurs, in addition to those of us that work for companies, are faced with a challenge of having to care for a family member while we build our business or work for our employer. There are many challenges, and Frank is an expert on addressing them. So today is part two of our discussion on the challenges faced by entrepreneurs who are caregivers for parents or other family elders. In our first episode, we discussed the importance of pre-planning and what can happen if there is no plan for emergencies, for care, for an elder. Today, we're going to talk a little bit about the nitty-gritty. What are the day-to-day, week-to-week, month-to-month ongoing challenges faced by entrepreneurs with regards to giving care to a parent or a family elder? Financial, emotional, time-wise, energy-wise. So, Frank, if you would, welcome, first of all.
Thank you, Steve.
Thanks for joining us and bring us into the daily life of an entrepreneur who is a caregiver for a family elder. On a day-to-day basis, what are some of the challenges they're likely to face as they try to balance both worlds?
Well, you listed it right there with emotional, physical, financial, all the constraints on time, and then also energy. And so, as every entrepreneur knows, that running a business, regardless how many people you have working with you as employees or freelancers, there's always that sense that you're spinning a lot of plates, and you have a lot of roles as an entrepreneur. And to be super effective at those roles, you have to enable the team around you to do a good job and have great communication, great transparency with what you want to have happen. But when you have the day-to-day pressures and frustrations of caregiving for an elderly person that is close to you, on top of that, usually what I find is that the entrepreneur doesn't put self-care as number one, and just is in a bit of a storm of frustration and time constraints where their creativity drops, their communication abilities and patience with their employees drop. And so that usually creates a whole ball of frustration that they therefore carry through to their personal lives. And then when it comes to, I think on the last episode, we talked about this too, that when we come to that position where you have that much frustration at work, then when you're in your personal life and you're trying to be that caregiver, there's hardly any left of you for the emotional support that the person that you're caregiving to really needs to receive from you, because of the emotional connection that you really should have there to offer that person. But in a lot of cases, you don't have much left in the tank. So you don't have that ability to be there for people the way you normally would. So that also is compounded in a lot of cases by the lack of self-care for the entrepreneur, that they're super busy at work trying to make everybody happy there, clients, vendors, employees, and then also when they go home, they have to take care of the everyday, day-to-day living challenges, but then also to really go over and above for that care piece. And then what gets left behind almost every time is their personal health. And we're not robots. It's important to take care of yourself so then we can therefore in turn take care of the people that really rely on us.
I hear you. So you're kind of equating, you're saying that self-care is necessary to maintain the emotional resilience that's needed so you can be there emotionally for the family member that needs the care.
Definitely.
So, what are ways that somebody can care for themselves? What is the entrepreneur supposed to do? Go out and take an hour and meditate? Go to the gym, take a walk? What are the ways that somebody can take care of themselves, rejuvenate themselves emotionally, and still stay focused on getting back to the business?
It's a great question, and it's different for everybody, but a lot of clarity comes from having a group of people around you that support you, and for you to be openly communicating with those people with your struggles and desires, and you'd be surprised how many people around you actually do want to help. And so a lot of times, many of the people that are the entrepreneurs that are in this situation feel like they're alone, and you're likely not. But if you don't share with anybody, if you don't lean on anybody for help, then you will be alone. And so moving past that is a really strong step. Also, to step back and try to get some clarity as to where does your day go? What are in a lot of cases you like to look at A activities with A relationships, spending your time very intentionally as to is this time the best person that I can spend the time with? Is this time the best activity I can spend the time with? Because there's only so much time in the run of the day. And so as you go through that audit of your day to get clarity of how you're spending your time, then that gives you the opportunity to start structuring your day that you can fit it all in. And in many cases, I like to sort of lean on the Stephen Covey material where he talks about first things first, living in a way that you look at urgent versus important. And so in a lot of cases, I find the entrepreneur that's caregiving is living in urgent mode all the time. And so everything in your life can't be urgent. That's how you get burnt out, like you said. And so one of the things that I like to look at is to take the first 20% of somebody's day and really focus on what are the most important things that will impact either their personal life or their self-care or their business, and do that at the first 20% of their day. Because then whatever happens throughout the day becomes more and more reactive as the day goes on. But to put those big rocks, again, quoting the Stephen Covey philosophy, he talks about, identifying what your roles in your life are, those being the big rocks in your life, and then attaching the goals to those roles, and then finding, the time block to make sure that they happen. And when you look at the course of a day, many times, there's not enough time to do everything. But if, you do the most important things first, then you don't get burnt out.
I get your emphasis on time management. I get your emphasis on not feeling alone, but I need to ask you, you're emphasizing receiving nurturance and support from the people around you. A lot of times, an entrepreneur is surrounded by subordinates, secretaries or clerks or even managers. I mean, isn't that a little bit risky to to disclose personal issues to somebody that you might have to fire the next, there's a hierarchy there. How much sharing do you do with people that work for you?
That's a good question, and it's a fine line. You can overshare, and you do want to keep that relationship of respect and, your personal life out of your work life to a certain degree, no question. But having the transparency that, what, I'm running this business, I'm happy to have you doing your role. These are your well-defined roles. I need you to do this role because I have a lot of demands on my personal life at home. And you can say, I'm taking care of an elderly family member, and I'll need to be able to leave at different times, and I'll need to make sure that you handle your role appropriately. And so that puts more onus on the employee to have a deeper buy-in as to, well, I'm doing it because it's my job. One would think that that would happen in the first place, but even more so, the dedication to you and to want to support you'll find in many cases a very good reaction to that.
I get that. So you're kind of keeping people at an arm's length. You're not necessarily sharing all the nitty-gritty details. You're not necessarily sharing all your deep emotions about the agony of seeing your father get sick type of stuff, but you're letting them know in general terms, I'm going through this, and therefore you're giving them enough to respond and be encouraged to give you a little bit extra because of what you're going through, which is what we'd like to see from people that we depend on.
No question.
I get that.
And realistically, in a perfect world, everybody responds appropriately. And if they don't, then perhaps they're not the right person in that position anyway. And so, that's in a lot of cases where, when you have somebody to really have a good look at the team around you and make sure that the people are aligned with the jobs that they're most uniquely skilled at and that they enjoy. That really helps increase the culture of the dedication and the loyalty, and also just the effectiveness of the people that are in those roles. If you have that discussion with somebody and there's really no response, then maybe they're not the right person.
Well, how would you know that beforehand? I mean, if you were an entrepreneur trying to build a humane, mutually dependent, care for each other type of culture in your workplace, what kind of questions do you ask, or how would you know at the beginning of the recruitment process that this is the kind of person that would demonstrate that kind of dedication?
That's definitely the core of the issue there, because so many entrepreneurs, they have a position to fill. They put it an ad in something like Indeed or through the internet to attract applications, and when you're in a place of desperation, you're likely to hire just anybody that'll take the job. And so really what you need to do is step back and go through a very strong selection and recruitment process that you've really identified exactly what the person needs to do in the role, what their capabilities need to be to do that, and then also their values and what they're like as a person, and if they'll fit into your culture. And so, there's the old adage, I'm sure you've heard it, is it's better to hire for attitude and train for skill. You have to have some skill, but hire for attitude is more important than skill. And so if you don't feel that you're have the I'll say ability to go through that discernment yourself, you don't have the resources to do it yourself, or maybe you find that you're not really that great at selecting and recruiting and hiring people, then outsource that when possible to somebody that is really good at that.
Okay, so basically you're saying if you put enough thought into the recruiting process, you'll end up with a team who will respond when you need them. And it won't necessarily just be you. I mean, in this case, we're talking about the entrepreneur going through a hard time because he or she has to take care of an elderly parent. It could easily be the secretary, it could easily be the marketing manager, it could easily be the guy in charge of inventory who's going through the same thing, and therefore the entrepreneur and the other folks would have to be as dedicated.
Exactly.
Okay. Let's go back to your point about the 20% of your time. Did you say that the 20% of your time should be dedicated to self-care and it should happen first thing in the day? Is that what you said?
Yeah, yeah. Like, everybody's cadence is a little different there. Some people like to go for, go to the gym or take care of themselves in some physical activity in the evening, and that's fine too. But it's generally proven that if you take care of yourself at the first part of the day, then that is the biggest of all big rocks. Because if you're not strong, if you're not clear, then the rest of the day becomes harder, and it's an accumulative effect. And so if you don't take care of yourself over time, then your productivity and your enthusiasm for life drops dramatically. So we all know how the day can get busy. So even if it's just a shorter period of time, it's the habit of taking care of yourself first at the first part of the day. It really does make a huge difference.
I see that. How you start your day sets the tone for the rest of the day. Um, it seems to me that what you just said certainly applies not just to the entrepreneur who may be going through a tough time as a caregiver, but applies to everybody, how everybody starts the day. So, have you ever heard of an entrepreneur starting each day with a yoga session, with a meditation, with a volleyball game? Have you heard of people running companies who help everybody start their day on a good note with some kind of group activity?
Definitely. And you actually see it happen quite often if you go to a convention of sorts. And so, I don't know if you've ever been to conventions. Certainly in the insurance industry, there's tons of them. A lot of them will start off with a dance, or they'll start off with, a group gym session, that sort of thing. And there's a reason for that, because what we just talked about. And so find what's good for you. Find what works for you. Like, you don't have to become an Olympic athlete, but if you can spend a few minutes meditating, you can spend a few minutes. Maybe your version of meditation is to listen to music that really makes you happy. Go for a walk. It doesn't have to be a huge thing, but the habit of taking care of yourself a little bit at the first of each day will grow.
Along those same lines, I know in my company, I'm aware that, when you employ people that take care of their families, take care of children, maybe sometimes they're coming from another job, I encourage everybody, you need transition time. You can't import the suffering and the grief you have from your family or your prior job into this place. So, there's got to be a transition point. I get this.
And definitely, in addition to that, when you're in a caregiving role, it's super important to refresh several times through the day, whatever that means for you. And so if it's to take 15 minutes in the middle of the day to go for a walk or step outside, just be alone, get some air, whatever refreshes you. But to just, put your head down and be a slave to the entire day is not going to replenish you, and it doesn't give you that energy for you to be able to tackle all the things that you have to tackle.
Very good point. All right, so I think, Frank, you've given us a good idea of the type of emotional sustenance and the moves that are needed to rejuvenate yourself um, throughout the day when you're in the tough situation of being a caregiver or entrepreneur. Are there any last points you'd like to make or teachings you'd like to share along these lines?
That pretty much covers it. Aside from, we talked a lot about time, clarity, self-care, and the resources of the people around you. But to dig into the resources with the people around you, more so than just, your employees, for an example. We also, I think on the last conversation we talked about other family members maybe being able to step up and help with the burden of caregiving. If you have siblings, for example, spouses, that sort of thing. But in addition to that, the other professionals in your life. So, we talked also about having people around you that, helped structure your finances so that your finances would be in place in the pre-planning mode, but also having good solid finances and being on top of your cash flow, on top of your financial choices, as you're going through the caregiving role also can enable some clarity in terms of how you can remove some of the burden of time from your plate and use the professionals around you to do so, to help that.
Very well said. Thank you, Frank. That concludes this segment of our discussion about caregiving entrepreneurs as related to caring for parents. In our next episode, we'll discuss the nuances related to an entrepreneur caregiving for a spouse who may need the care and kind of compare and contrast the challenges there with the challenges faced when you're caring for a parent. So stay tuned. Thanks everybody for coming.
Great. Thanks, Steve.
Okay.